Can you use Games Workshop models? Can you use 40K models without the Warhammer 40K rule set? That's what we're going to explore in this vlog. And approaching this question as both a Warhammer 40K enthusiast for a long time, I love the Grimdark, but also involved in other wargaming systems, you begin to see that the rule set for Warhammer 40,000, it's not the primary focus of the game. It never has been. And even Games Workshop has gone to great lengths to say this. They produce the world's best sci-fi miniatures, both Age of Sigmar, 40K, and Lord of the Rings. That's their focus. The rules are optional. The rules are a byproduct, as opposed to most traditional wargaming systems where the rules are the focus. The rules drive the models don't drive the rules. Now, we jump into this with Games Workshop, a lack of balance, a lack of playability, a lack of support, and there is, rightly so, some frustration. I don't need a perfect rule set, but I need a functional rule set. I need a rule set that is updated, especially, and I realize in 40K, I mean, really, if you look at the various factions that Games Workshop supports in the Grimdark, there are a lot of armies. There are a lot of units. And to really dedicate and balance those units without reducing them to just kind of generic, all the same, that does take a lot of work. That is a big undertaking. But if you're going to put those out there, I would like to know if I purchase miniatures and I invest in them, they're going to be playable, they're going to be supported. And that's before we get into this idea of Games Workshop constantly cycling. And maybe this is true, maybe this isn't true. Depends if you're a competitive 40K player or not. Depends on the scope. We're just putting the framework out there. Models that aren't supported, units that aren't supported. One moment, this unit is great. Another moment later, it's dropped. That creates a lot of internal frustration. Finally, combined with the fact that Games Workshop, their business model is FOMO. If you don't buy the models now, they're limited release, you're not going to get them. So this creates this idea of essentially making the rule set unworkable, chaseable, or hard to utilize. Can you jump to another rule set? Well, they are just models. And the question with the rules is this, from my perspective with Grimdark. We want to capture the narrative of 40K. I want to feel like I'm immersed in that narrative. And I want to have a structure somewhat fair. I mean, no rule set is perfect, but somewhat fair with the expectation that the other players, we both know what we can do and what we can't do. I want to have that awareness. As long as those two things can come together, it's going to work. Now, the advantage of using the 40K rule set in whatever state it may or may not be in is the fact that it's almost like a universal language. It's like Gothic Basic. If you understand the rules, I can go to any club, I can go to any place, I can play. You can bring over your army, I can bring over my army. We can play from that perspective. Once you navigate into the world of homebrew or custom rules or even a completely different rule set, you lose that portability. Now, maybe that's not a big deal. If you're not playing on the competitive scene, what does it matter? If you're part of a gaming club or a gaming group and you decide to house rule or change things to take on more of an RPG approach, that's okay also. I mean, that works fantastic also from that perspective. So it aims to determine what do you want out of your models. So now I'm going to offer a rule set that I've utilized as an alternative to 40K. It works fantastic. It's a lot of fun to play. It replicates that grimdark feeling. It takes the models and puts them into select units that you can play with. Now, in that perspective, in exploring that, there is this idea of I want to be able to use all of my models and get the most out of my model collection. And this is true of any wargaming system. I also enjoy Battletech, Pacific Rim Extinction. I'm playing historicals. I want to get the most X-Wing miniatures. I want to get the most out of my collection. So I utilize the rules that are inherent to that collection, but I'm ready to break free. I'm ready to try it. Chain of Command, World War II. Now, I know we're jumping into historicals. We're taking kind of Grimdark and moving it to World War II. I've pushed up to my channel here under the Chain of Command playlist a preview of that rule set. A preview. It's a snapshot of how it works. And certainly here on YouTube, there's battle reports and rules analysis out there on the web. Absolutely. But Chain of Command as a rule set, the way it works with deployment, the way it works with the ability, it's not just you go, I go. There are interrupts, there are resources. You can be moving and I can interrupt, I can move. There's Overwatch capacity. There's a lot to the game. It's not just very 1980s DNA, you go, I go, you move all your toys, roll dice, I sit here, do nothing for 20 minutes. It's constant interaction. And while it's a hybrid you go, I go system, with the interrupts or the chance to continue your turn after you've taken your turn, there's a lot of bite to it. And I love the rule set because it does two things really well. And for me, this is the biggest challenge. If I had to reduce Games Workshop's rules, this is the biggest challenge to me. As you move through a game with 40K, there are, for whatever reason, and those reasons are complex, absolutely, but for whatever reason, you reach a point where I always play it out to the end out of respect to my friends, right? You and I are taking time out of our life to play. I'm always going to play that game out. I'm always going to fight to the bitter end. But let's be honest. Often with GW games, you know, at a certain point halfway through, there's nothing I can do. The rules are so unbalanced, I'm going to lose. And maybe I had some bad dice rolls. Maybe I made some tactical mistakes, which, look, I often do. Playing my Cornate Berserkers, going for chaos, glory. At least I know what I'm getting into. But you reach that point halfway through the game where you know, look, I can't win for whatever factors. That's kind of a dead game. Chain of Command, you reach a point where the game has so much flow to it, even if you're losing, it is possible to turn things around. Notice I say possible. Might be very difficult. It might be challenging. You've lost a lot of units. You're on the run. But based on resource management, based on interrupts, based on how the dice are utilized, because you have a decision of how to utilize the dice. It's D6 system. From that perspective, there is a chance you can pull off a win. There is a chance you can pull off a draw. Likewise, I don't have to be on autopilot. If I'm winning a Games Workshop game, I kind of go on autopilot. Okay, I mean, I won. You want to just come back in like 3 turns? Chain of Command, even when you're winning, you have to watch out for those interrupts. You have to watch out for various shifts. So taking that and porting it over to the Chain of Command system, using the army lists from World War II and reducing those units, pulling those units out to something kind of universal and putting in, okay, Space Marines are going to represent this. Imperial Guard are going to represent this. And building the squads out that way with how it works, it's very, very playable. And given the massive size of my Necron collection, my Tyranid collection, Space Marines, Chaos, being able to fulfill multiple roles, multiple army lists, multiple builds, playing that, to be able to take all those models and utilize them and be free from a rule set system that GW has put forth, it's been very, very interesting, very, very enjoyable. Now I'm going to turn it over to a second part and ask the question, is Games Workshop eventually going to get to a point, I mean, how much do the rules really drive 40K? Are they going to get to a point where they realize this is almost like a zero-sum game, right? It's not in our best interest to really do the rules anymore. If they just put out the models and left the rules up to you, is that something that could be figured out? Because there are other rules systems out there. If we kind of go back to that Rogue Trader feel where it's mix and match of everything, if GW goes back to that, or, and I believe this is true, they know exactly what they're doing. Games Workshop is very smart. So they know by making the rules incomplete, by making them with a lack of balance, by having it back and forth, switching factions. One moment this is good, one moment that's not good. Blood Angel players are eternally hoping that BA will be really good and competitive. GW drives the model sales because of FOMO and what you need just to play the game from that perspective. But certainly the miniatures are physical. They're there. Nothing is stopping us. Nothing is stopping you. Nothing is preventing it from utilizing, and I'm just giving Chain of Command as an example, but numerous rule sets out there. You know, one-page Grimdark, to play that. But in doing that, you lose that commonality. You lose that ability, that portability where you can go to any club, any place, and utilize your army. Depends on the gaming group. Depends on the focus. Depends on the aim.